Hello, my name's Tahnee Pearse. I'm the Associate Director of Content at the University of Southern Queensland in Toowoomba, Australia, and the project lead for the Council of Australian University Librarians OER Collective Pilot Project that I'll be talking to you about today. This presentation was co-written with Kate Davis, who's the Director of Strategy and Analytics at CALL. Before I begin, I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge the traditional owners of country throughout Australia, including the traditional owners of the unceded lands on which I live and work, the Guyabal and Jarowair peoples of the Toowoomba area. I pay my respect to the elders past, present and emerging for all First Nations peoples, wherever they are located. I mentioned the Council of Australian University Libraries before. Just as way of an introduction, it's also called CALL. It's a peak leadership organisation for university libraries in Australia and New Zealand. And our shared purpose is to transform how people experience knowledge, how it can be discovered, used and shared. And this is underpinned by the acknowledgement that university libraries are really important in providing knowledge and information infrastructures that enable student achievement and research excellence. CALL has a number of strategic priorities in place for 2020 to 2022. Of those, the OER Collective Pilot Project fits into the Enabling a Modern Curriculum priority, and a modern curriculum is defined by CALL as lifelong learning, student success, digital dexterity, career readiness, and new learning paradigms. The objectives of the Collective Pilot Project were firstly to build infrastructure capacity and to achieve tangible incomes to move the OER agenda forward in Australia and New Zealand. We wanted to allow member institutions to have a go at publishing their own textbooks in disciplines that were relevant to their institution. And we really wanted to foster collaborative authoring and publishing of open textbooks, particularly in targeted priority disciplines, with a preference for the inclusion of local and or Indigenous content. The collective intended and is supporting member institutions who are at a variety of stages within the open textbook development adoption, adaptation and creation. So all of our members are at different stages, and we embrace that, and we draw on the strength of the CALL membership network to actually share insights, share skills, share experience, and to collaborate on open textbooks. Why do we need such an OER collective pilot project? Like your communities, students are feeling financial pressure in Australia and New Zealand, and I've just included a few headlines there to give you an insight into that. We also know that open textbooks particularly have a range of positives attached to them. So they can improve student experience. Students have access from day one to the textbook, day one of their course. Academic staff members have more autonomy where they can customise their content, update their content, mash different bits of content together. There's also the opportunity for industry engagement in the resources and with the resources. Students and staff have ongoing availability once they leave the institution. We can also support diversity, equity and inclusion through these resources. And we are also importantly addressing the budget pressures we're all feeling and the rising institutional costs. These are two quotes that I think really define the why as well. So Amanda White, who's a senior lecturer in accounting at the University of Technology, Sydney, who recently produced an accountancy open textbook, said that an open textbook is the purest form of academic work because we're not doing it for money or the prestige, but to support student learning and to support our peers and colleagues. Nicholas Poole of CLIP said the library wants to help you live your best life, not so it can tax you or drive targeted marketing at you or sell you data, but because society is better when everyone is empowered with knowledge, literacy and learning. Now, some research was undertaken in Australia and New Zealand to actually look at why, or what was stopping us really embracing the adoption, adaptation or creation of open textbooks and OERs. And what it found was that we really needed support centrally from a peak body, particularly in terms of capacity building and the infrastructure to actually push out these items. We conducted a survey last year through Call, which included some questions about OER adoption and open textbooks. And 30% of survey respondents actually had an articulated commitment to promoting the creation, adaptation and use of open textbooks at their institution. That was in varying ways. They might be using existing, adapting them and creating them. Some weren't using them at all. We also found that 46% of libraries provided support for the creation or adaptation of open textbooks, those that were actually engaging. And that could be providing advice about open access licenses, copyright assistance, promotion of the text, using it and providing a publishing platform, and project management. This question I found really telling and goes to the core of the collective. Many libraries felt they weren't adequately resourced to meet the demand to support open textbooks. They also had concerns about the skills, knowledge and experience their staff had to meet the demands. So this led to the creation of the OER collective pilot project model earlier this year. It's based on the delivery of 2 participation tiers. We started off just with one, the Connect tier, but the second one, the Drive tier, will be offered next year. Connect is really focused on community building and allowing an institution of any experience with open textbook publishing to have a go. So to provide them with 2 bookshelves on Pressbooks to create a book that's of interest to their institution. But also to be part of a community and capacity building. The second tier, collaborative publishing, really looks at driving that open textbook and OER agenda forward across Australia and New Zealand, and also really pushing collaborative publishing, particularly on high impact textbooks that include that local and Indigenous knowledge. Really crucial to supporting those tiers, particularly Connect this year, are 4 key components, 4 foundations, a platform, so the publishing platform, capacity building, so getting those skills out into the community, building community, and the provision of grants. This slide actually shows you how we managed the pilot. So the Call board, the Council of Australian University Librarians board, is drawn from university librarians, obviously, and they gave us that strategic priority of enabling a modern curriculum. We have a program director, Fiona Salisbury, who's at the Western Sydney University. She's a university librarian there, and she works with the Call National Office and the Call OER Collective Pilot project team to actually deliver the project. So the Call National Office looks after the administrative support, the grants program and Pressbooks management. And they work with the project team that's drawn from member institutions. So an expression of interest went out for inclusion on that team. And I look after that team, and we drive the community of practice management, open educational resource workflow guides. We plan for the different participation tiers and phases, the Connect and Drive tiers, and we review and evaluate as we go. So we report to a governance group. So they actually look after things like the grant allocation of additional bookshelves if needed. They advise the board on our progress, and they advise on cross-institutional issues if they arise. And that feeds right down to the operational level at the member institution, where we have a nominated institutional contact who is involved in our community of practices, which I'll talk about soon. They provide that on-the-ground advice on things like, on publishing, but on copyright, on open access licensing, and they adhere to the publishing standards. We've packed a lot into the last year and a bit. So we formed the project team in July. We've done things like deliver the survey I've mentioned. We had a call go out for members, and we actually launched the collective in February this year. We had a community day. We launched some of our guides in late March. and then we've followed on with our community of practice meetings, the provision of press books, course shells, and grants. So I've mentioned these 4 foundations of our pilot: community, capacity building, and publishing platform, and the grants program. I'm going to go into those in a bit more detail now. Firstly, community. We have 31 institutional members in the collective pilot project, which blew us away, and they're drawn from across Australia and New Zealand. This map just shows the spread in Australia, and we're really lucky to have both, major centres, but also rural and regional areas as well. We have coverage in the North and South Islands of New Zealand. And our project team members, as I mentioned, and our governance group members and our institutional members are drawn from all of these regions. So that's really exciting for collaboration and network growth. So we've had a look at the institutions as a community, and that pull into the actual management of the pilot project, which has been so good for our members, but we're also, most importantly, supporting those on the ground. So those libraries who are partnering with authors. And what we've found is that they now see the possibility, they now see the academic authors and library staff that, we can actually gain momentum. And this is a really good quote along those lines, that there are possibilities to develop things, that there are people in this university who will want to support those things, that there is an opportunity to put money towards those things. That is the greatest thing, because it encourages further work, it encourages further research, and it encourages the people working on the ground to communicate with other people. So we've talked about community. The second foundation is capacity building. So building those skills that we know through that survey are needed to support open textbook. Our communities of practice have been produced to build both community, but also build those skills. So we've got 2 on offer, one for library staff members. So they're the institutional contacts at each member institution, and academic authors. So originally that was offered just for authors publishing to the Call Pressbooks platform, but now that's been extended to authors that are interested in open publishing. Both of those have really good sized cohorts, and we actually meet every 6 weeks via Zoom, and we've got a number of themes charted for the year. We're planning our themes for next year. So there's synchronous meetings. The first half hour is a seminar, information sharing. The second half hour is, Q&A, questions, answers, and shared practice. That's working really well. We also have asynchronous communication through email lists and Slack spaces. In the top left-hand corner of this slide, you'll see that there's a community day listed. We had that on the 31st of March, and we had 250 attendees and really positive feedback about that experience. Another area of capacity building are the creation of guides and workflows to support the process. So we came up with the OER collective publishing workflow with 7 phases: initiate, plan, draft, design, review, publish, and evaluate. And what we've got via a LibGuide is inbuilt guides into that workflow and checklists. So for example, in the left-hand margin, if I clicked on initiate, you'll see I get a drop-down list with options for guides on different phases within that step. So I could look at, what does Creative Commons licensing mean? What do I need to understand with copyright? This is very much Australia and New Zealand focus, which is really good for our group. So I've clicked on finding open textbooks to adopt or adapt in those options. It lists, international sites, but it also lists specific Australian and New Zealand sites, which we didn't have in one central spot up until now. And right down the bottom of that initiate phase option, you'll see that there's a checklist option. Each of the 7 phases have that listed, each of the stages. If I click on that checklist, you'll notice there's a tab for authors and for library staff. I've got the author checklist open for the initiate phase. It just lists everything that an academic needs to think about through this initiate process. And depending on their level of understanding or where they're at in publishing, they can pick and choose from that what they need to know and what they need to engage with. So it's a really fantastic resource. The other resource we came up with was an administrative guide for library staff. So it's for those institutional members on the ground who are actually conducting that support, carrying out that support for academic authors for those 2 open textbook outputs. So for example, if I click on, and again, this is a LibGuide, if I click on operations and then on grants programs, I get all of the information I need about the grants, the OER collective grants, and that was well used during the grant EOI process. And yeah, there's a range of information there. We hope to grow it and have it as an information sharing portal too. So we've looked at 2 of those foundations, community and capacity building. The third is the publishing platform. So we've gone with Pressbooks. I've put the address there. There's nothing live at the moment, but there's 26 open textbooks in progress, and we expect that they will be available in February next year. We had Pressbooks training to further build that capacity, basic and advanced training, and 217 attendees were present. We have come up with branding, and we're working on a style guide so we can assist institutions with that if they need it, and plan for things like textbook covers. The 4th foundation pillar for this collective program is grants. So they were designed to incentivise development of open textbooks by academic authors at our member institutions. We had 4 categories that those grants could be put in for: high impact projects, emerging disciplines, Australia and New Zealand content, and rebalancing representation. We also really wanted to foster the inclusion of Indigenous content written by Indigenous authors and the inclusion of content in or about Indigenous languages. And individuals or groups could actually put in for these grants, and the textbooks are to be published under a CC by non-commercial license, but that's negotiable with the grant recipients. We had 32 grant applications and 15 were grant recipients came out of that. We had 34,500 grants in total. So that included for each grant recipient, for each project, 2 $250 peer review stipends as part of that. So the grants, I've listed them against those 4 categories, were varied. So everything from legal reasoning to anatomy to thermodynamics to medical genomics to sociology to looking at research and stats in psychology. So we're really excited to see these early next year. So we've talked about those 4 components of support for the collective: building community, building capacity, making the grants available, and a publishing platform. We're planning ahead for the next phase. We're in that current Connect participation tier. We're moving towards the Drive, but they will run in parallel as well. So we're planning for that Drive phase now. We're working on getting our evidence gathering established. So we want to set up data dashboards for each of the open textbooks that are published for use by academic staff who really are looking at impact and usage. We're working on our next grant offering based on learnings from our previous. We're also further refining those guides, so the OER workflow and the administration guides, because we're getting a lot of feedback and that's been fantastic. We're reviewing phase 1 at the moment as well, because we're really hoping to learn from what we've done this year. So that's the end of the presentation, but I would like to say thank you. I was looking for a pithy quote to finish, linked to thanks and open access, but I did come across this great definition of gratitude, and it really made me think it was pertinent to open access. So gratitude can be described as a warm sense of appreciation for somebody or something. We are all here today appreciative of open access and the potential of open access for accessibility and inclusion and good outcomes for our staff and students. We all have a sense of goodwill towards it. So we're willing to share practice. We know that in our roles we can make an impact, and we're happy to share that information. So when we were getting the collective pilot project together, we had a lot of input from other practitioners internationally. So Open Oregon and BC Campus met with us. We did environmental scans. And now, through this collective pilot, we have a disposition to act that flows from this appreciation and goodwill. So thank you. We're happy to collaborate or share more about our experiences if you'd like to reach out.